Proceed with caution is how I would tell any Raider fan out there. When you watch a Pete Carroll presser, proceed with caution because you're going to probably leave that feeling some type of way. And when you watch the Raiders report, and if you see that I'm going to give my reaction to a Pete Carroll presser, I want you to proceed with caution. And if you feel that exact same way, I want you to hit that subscribe button because I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you guys up to date. I don't care if it's good news. I don't care if it's bad news. I do videos around this show, and the idea of I think that it makes sense for a Raider fan. I think a Raider fan would want to know the information that is out there. And after you just got your ass kicked 31-0 up against the Philadelphia Eagles, to me, the number one thing that I wanted to see today is what Pete Carroll said to the media and what the media asked Pete Carroll. So if you're a diehard fan, and even in a 2-12 season, I promise you this, nobody's going to keep you more up to date than hear us on the Raiders Report. So obviously, Pete talked about a bunch of different things. We were live on the Raiders Report earlier today for the Pete Carroll presser. And a lot of times when I do these shows, I try to figure out what are the most important things that I gathered from the Pete Carroll press. So the first question that really stuck out to me was Pete's answer in terms of will he be back? And he said 3 different quotes when he was asked about whether or not he's going to be back. And I'm not really going to sit up here and dissect these too much because when you look at exactly what he had to say, I think these are the types of things that a head coach that doesn't know what to say ends up saying. So the first thing was like, well, we're just getting started. Pete, man, like it's week 16, bro. If we're just getting started in week 16, I mean, that should have been a problem right from the jump. He also, in terms when he was asked about his job security, he said, I don't feel like that at all. I really don't. I'm well beyond that. And, when he was asked about whether or not he's going to be back next season, I think he already knows in his heart of hearts that he's not going to be back next season. And I've talked to a lot of people that have a lot of sources inside of that building, people that I know that have met Pete personally, people that know the Raiders ownership group personally, and I would be shocked if the Raiders ended up bringing back Pete Carroll. He also then, Pete had something to say in terms of a rebuild. It's looking like that's what's necessary. That makes me want to pull my hair out because the reason why Pete Carroll was brought into this job to begin with was to not only do a little bit of a rebuild, and I get it, Pete probably thought that he was going to be able to win some football games, but how are you as an organization going to hire a 73, 74-year-old head coach when you look at the roster that this team had going into the offseason? If you thought that this was going to be a team that you were just going to be able to throw out there and win football games and bringing in dudes like Alex Kappa, Devin White, and the list goes on and on, how do we think that that's going to be a team that wins football games? The hope was that your coaching staff was going to be good. I think Pete honestly thought that this was a good enough team to be able to win right now. So to me, I'm looking at right now whether or not Pete's going to be back, and I'm just going to sit up here and I'm going to go, the Raiders need to do a rebuild. And you can't rebuild with a 74-year-old head coach. Pete has shown me every single week that the game has passed him by. And I know that Pete expected to win 10 games this upcoming season, but for your head coach to be able to say some of the things that he said, a rebuild is required. But a rebuild is also really important. You need to have good coaching. And you need to have a coaching staff that not only can coach, but can teach. And I don't think that they can coach. I don't think that they can teach. So will Pete Carroll be back? God, I really, and I mean this, really flippin' hope not. Let's go to the next big takeaway here that I got from the Pete Carroll presser. Again, proceed with caution. Geno Smith, is he going to end up being the starting quarterback this week up against the Houston Texans? The thing that Pete said in here is, again, why I get frustrated, not only at Pete Carroll, but why I'm frustrated at times with the Raiders media group that they allow him to get away with this type of shit. So this is what he had to say. Yeah, as far as I know, he's got a chance to do that. We don't have all the info in yet. We'll know more Wednesday. Whoever asked this question, I give you kudos for asking Pete Carroll a question about Geno Smith. Want to give you kudos on that. But your follow-up should have been, well, what is the injury that Geno Smith is dealing with? Because He injured his shoulder week 14. You're telling me the starting quarterback of the Las Vegas Raiders, it's been over a week, and we still don't know exactly what we're dealing with? I get he was labeled as having a back injury. I get he was labeled as having a shoulder injury. I think he also was labeled as having another injury on top of that when I saw the injury report last week. But there are rumors. There are rumors out there that Geno Smith doesn't want to play for this organization anymore. There are rumors out there that he was going to fake an injury so he doesn't have to play. And I get it. Raiders beat reporters, Raiders beat writers, they probably don't pay attention to all the outside noise because they're focused on themselves and what's going on inside of that building. But your job as a Raiders beat reporter, your job as a Raiders beat writer is to understand also everything else that's going on. So like me, if I'm in that room and I ask that question and they give me that type of response, I'm going to go, well, what's the injury? Why did our quarterback miss the game last week? Because we're still sitting here a week later and you still don't have all the info yet on a Geno Smith injury? How's that possible? To me, when something smells fishy, you got to wonder if there's fish in it, right? Like, if something seems weird, there's probably a reason why it's weird. So when I'm told that Geno Smith could fake an injury and he ends up getting hurt and we still a week later don't know anything about that injury, I'm sorry. Maybe it's a coincidence. But also I think it smells a little bit fishy. So since we're talking about the quarterback here, I'm going to ask you, because Kenny Pickett and the Raiders, 75 total yards, it was bad from top to bottom, no doubt about it. And at this point, I want us to start the quarterback that gives us the best chance to lose. It sucks to say it, but Pete Carroll and this Raiders team, they suck, and they are to blame for why we feel the way that we do. So let me know down below in the comments section. Give me a GS for Geno Smith. Give me a KP for Kenny Pickett. Or if you think somebody else should start at quarterback, type O down below. The reason why I want Geno Smith to start for the Las Vegas Raiders is a multitude of different reasons. One, you paid him. Pete, that's the guy you wanted, and there's so much tape out on Geno Smith that I don't think it matters if it's Geno Smith. I don't think it matters if it's Kenny Pickett. Those two quarterbacks are not going to win games for the Raiders. Quite frankly, I think that the way that I should have asked this question is the only guy I don't want to see is Aiden O'Connell. And I mean that. The only guy I don't want to see is Aiden O'Connell, and I mean that for two reasons. One, because I think Aiden might give us actually the best shot to win a football game. And two, I don't want to see Aiden O'Connell get his shit pushed in, because I think that there's a chance that Geno Smith is going to get his shit pushed in against the Houston Texans defense. Let's go to the next big reaction here from the Pete Presser reaction. The statement that he made in regards to Charles Grant, I love it and I hate it at the same time. But this is the problem with Pete Carroll, and this, I think, is the problem right now with the Pete Carroll Raiders. Because, again, I think Pete talks, and when he talks to people, I think a lot of the times it's like, well, I've had so much success in the past. I know, but you're not having success now. So when you're not having success now, what you say right now maybe doesn't carry as much weight. And I think for a team that is struggling the way that this team is struggling, and for having young rookies the way that we have young rookies, if I was the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders and our team was 2-12, I would do everything in my power to build up their confidence. The problem is, though, Pete only builds up certain players' confidence, like all the time, and then there's other players where he picks it apart a little bit. And I think for a rookie that's getting his very first snaps into the NFL, for Pete to say what he did, I loved it, and yet I kind of hated it at the same time. Here's what Pete had to say. I did like his aggressiveness. Again, he's talking about Charles Grant here. I thought he looked tough. He finished well, too. He kept his feet moving, drove the guy off the football a couple of times. It looked pretty good. Made a couple of mistakes and all, but I thought we'll like to see how he can find a way, how we can find a way to use him. The problem with that statement there, and again, the reason why I like it is because on tape, Charles Grant did do a lot of things. You can tell that he's got long arms, he's physical, and I think he did a really good job of kind of manhandling a little bit. There's one rep that I saw on Twitter. I believe it's from Marcus Johnson on Twitter. Please don't quote me on that. But I also retweeted it on my Twitter. I'm trying to think of who put it out there. But it's him like manhandling Jalen Phillips. And I like that rep out of Charles Grant a lot. But my point here is like there was only 5 snaps, right? So only 5 snaps from Charles Grant this past week up against Philadelphia. And then you're going to say he made a couple of mistakes. Well, if you make a couple of mistakes in 5 snaps, like how much is that good? How much is that bad? But I think the other really frustrating part about it is like just give the kid encouragement. Just show them a little bit of love. You drafted them in the 3rd round. I want to give my young players a little bit more positive reinforcement that, you know what, you're moving in the right direction. You don't give them a backhanded compliment. It's kind of like saying something nice and being like, well, no offense. It's kind of like a little bit of a backhanded compliment. But the other problem is Charles Grant, I thought, in the 5 snaps that I saw, I thought did a really, really good job, and I think he did his assignment exactly how he was supposed to do it for the situation that we were in. But how many times this season have we seen Pete Carroll back up a player, and you're sitting there going, Pete, I think the only reason why you're doing that is because it's one of your guys. So I saw this stat out here, and it's offensive linemen this season to allow 10-plus sacks in pass protection. Stone Forsythe, 11.5. Dan Moore Jr. from Tennessee, and then DJ Glaze. So it's the left tackle, Stone Forsythe, who, by the way, did not play the first 4 weeks of the season because Colt Miller did. And then DJ Glaze. There was a statement that Pete Carroll made a few weeks ago about that he thought Stone Forsythe was playing the best football of his career. And honestly, probably at that time, he probably was playing the best football of his career, which wasn't very good football, but it's still, the best football of his career. And Pete also says, well, we want to try to get him more opportunities. We want to get him more reps. DJ Glaze has really struggled this season. Stone Forsythe of late has really struggled this season. And I sit back and I look at the Raiders' offensive line coach. I look at the statements that Pete's saying. Pete, you're the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. If you want to make a change, if you want to find a way to get Charles Grant more involved, crazy, you can actually do it. You call the shots. You're the guy. But, I know that our Raiders rookies have been developing, and I'm happy that our Raiders rookies are developing, but I think that the only reason why we're actually getting to see them is because other players that this coaching staff believed in either has gone down with an injury or has been so horrifically bad that they have to bench them. And instead of saying, you know what, I was wrong for playing Stone Forsythe over Charles Grant. I was wrong in playing DJ Glaze over Charles Grant for all this time. Instead of just being like, yeah, Charles did a really good job in those 5 reps, you feel like you got to give him a backhanded compliment so that way your actions make sense to you in your mind. That's not what a good coach does. It's not what a good leader does. I always see this comparison, good leader and being a good boss. A good boss is important, but a boss sometimes doesn't always lead by example. I need a head coach to be able to lead by example, and right now, there's nothing that this Raiders coaching staff does that I think truly is the definition of leading by example. It's just really, really frustrating when the Pete Carroll pressers are almost just of a joke. And I say almost because the Pete Carroll pressers are not as much of a joke as the football team that shows up every Sunday. It's really, really frustrating. Coming up next here, we got more reactions to this Pete Carroll presser. Before I get into it, though, today's show sponsored by Prize Picks. And I talk about Prize Picks all the time because, quite frankly, this is the number one thing that I look forward to on Sundays. My fantasy football team, it's cooked. I hate it, but it's the truth. My Raiders football team, it's cooked, and I hate it. And, I make decisions every day. Sometimes I don't even know why I make a decision to do Raiders Report videos. If it wasn't for y'all, I don't know why I would even make them because of how frustrated I get. But you know what? I do love the nation. I do love this show. And I mean this when I say it. I do love Prize Picks. And the lineup that I put together for Raiders Eagles, I would have won $50. But they do have this new feature, so I wanted to be able to continue to talk about it this week. And it's an early payout. So if your lineup ends up, maybe not going the way you thought it was going to go, I actually think my lineup would have been perfect. But again, Saquon Barkley got benched in the 4th quarter because of how much of an ass kicking they were giving the Las Vegas Raiders. And I went back into the app, I noticed it, and I go, oh, man, they're giving me $27.40 because they probably think that Saquon Barkley is going to be able to get that amount. It kind of reminded me when I was a kid, my mom and I, we used to always watch this show, and it had it was like the bank where you could go, you could get money. It was like you picked a suitcase, and depending on how much money you got, I don't know, Reed's looking at me like I'm crazy. I'll try to find it. I think the guy's name is Howie. Deal or No Deal. Yes, thank you, Reed. That's kind of how I felt. I felt like yesterday the banker gave me a call, and they were like, $27.40. Deal or no deal? Well, here's my deal to you. If you download the Prize Picks app today, and if you use code CLNS, you're going to be able to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Let's keep it moving here on the Pete Carroll presser reaction. You know, one of the other things that he said that I just stuck out to me, and these aren't ranked in any particular order, they also aren't in the way that the press conference went. It was literally like, I wrote down my notes during the presser, and then I put this show together. But he said something about what he's focusing on the next 3 games. Here's what Pete had to say. We need to show improvement. We need to get better. We need to move the football better and get in the red zone and get some points on the frickin' board, man. Pete, I completely agreed with you. But your 2 statements there, if we need to show improvement and we need to get better, I actually hope that you're looking at yourself, and I hope that you're looking at your coaching staff, because I'll tell you this, if I was in that room, the number one thing that I would be focusing on if I was 2-12 and I was trying to really keep my job, save my job, is focusing on the development of your young talent. Because, you know, the biggest reason why somebody would want to keep Pete Carroll is you would want him to develop your young talent. Now, I wouldn't trust Pete Carroll to develop anything at this current point, and I don't think that you should want him to develop it either. But to me, Pete, like, the number one way that you're going to be able to save your job is if you can prove to everybody that you are developing this talent. And again, I don't want to give this coaching staff credit for these younger players that I think are starting to play a little bit better. I think, if anything, it just proves how bad of a coaching staff they are, that this was a team that decided to play, I don't know, Alex Kappa over JPJ at right guard at certain points, that this organization has decided to play Stone Forsythe and DJ Glaze over somebody like Charles Grant. Like somebody like Caleb Rogers, you know, continuously got put on the bench or got put down. But, like, there are some, Kai Blue Kelly playing over Darian Porter, and I know Darian Porter struggled yesterday. I mean, think about how many examples that we could come up with here where the Pete Carroll Raiders have done something a certain way. Like, imagine wanting to play Amari Cooper over trying to develop Jack Besh and Dante Thornton. And again, like, now Besh is starting to get more reps over Tyler Lockett, and I think it's because our coaching staff is like, oh, yeah, Jack Besh is a better player than Tyler Lockett. It's just when you fail to know the talent you have, recognize the talent you have, and fail to coach that talent, there's just nothing you can hang your hat on. So I know Pete's focusing on winning football games, and he should obviously focus on winning football games. But me, if I'm somebody in that room, I just hope that we don't win any of these next 3 games. Next thing that Pete said, and I definitely feel it, blind and optimistic. I think that this is the perfect definition for Pete Carroll right now. There's no way he sees the football game well, and there's no doubt he's blindly optimistic. And I think that he has to be because of the situation he has put himself in. I want to be very clear on that. You are in the situation you are in, Pete, because you put yourself there. Don't blame it on the players. Don't blame it on anybody else besides yourself. You got an entire offseason that a lot of coaches would die to be able to have. The amount of salary cap, the amount of draft picks, to be able to go out and get your guy at quarterback. You put yourself in this situation. So before you see this quote, I want that to be very well known. Pete Carroll, you're in this situation because you put yourself here. Here's what Pete Carroll had to say on Monday. Blindly optimistic as I am, I thought we'd come in here and we'd have a big factor on this club and we'd be able to find success that we'd be proud of. And right now, it doesn't feel like that. But you're right, Pete, it doesn't feel like that. And you were brought in here to not only have a big factor on this club and to have success. The 2 biggest jobs for Pete Carroll this year, based on the sources that I talked to, the 2 biggest jobs were to build a winning culture. Not saying that they were going to make the playoffs right away, but to build a winning culture. And I will continuously say that I think the Max Crosby contract tells you everything that you need to know about what the plan was for Pete Carroll. Because when you structure Max's contract the way that they did, the plan was to build a winning culture in 2025, start winning some more football games in 2026, be a Super Bowl caliber team in 2027. That, to me, was the Raiders' plan, and a lot of money, a lot of the contracts that they did, I think absolutely prove that. Hell, even I think the Geno Smith contract ends up proving that. But not only did you fail to win games, you also, your other big job was to get Raider Nation behind you and to put Raiders fans in the seats at Allegiant Stadium, because that's something that does bother Mark Davis. So when Pete's making the statements of, we need Raider Nation to support us, with all due respect, like, you kind of burned that bridge because you chose your quarterback over the well-being of Raider Nation. But also, it's just like you didn't punish a guy that should have been punished. But yet you're willing to throw around things to kind of knock down rookies like Caleb Rogers. Wasn't afraid to put him down. Wasn't afraid to give a backhanded compliment there to Charles Grant. A young player like JPJ wants to play center, and you hit us with an absolutely not. Again, there's so many examples, and I probably should do a whole video on all these examples. But, like, Pete, your job, you have failed at your job. And, yes, I do think there's blind optimism there. But I think it's blind optimism is the perfect definition, again, of what the Pete Carroll Raiders are. They're a team that doesn't see what's clearly in front of them, and they are optimistic that their predetermined notions that they came up with are going to work out, even though everybody here can see that they're not going to work out. But that's the Pete Carroll Raiders in 2025. So be honest with me here. I want you to grade Pete Carroll this season. Grade him as a head coach. I don't want you to just grade it based on what the record is. I know what these answers are going to be. But give me an A, B, C, D, or an F down below. We've all been to school. We've all had a grade on a test. How would you grade Pete Carroll this season? It's a big fat F. And I don't know how you don't give it anything else besides a big fat F. And if you didn't see the video that I did earlier this morning, this is the worst Raiders team of all time. And if you're like, no, it's not, Mitch. I remember the Jamarcus Russell Raiders. I remember the you give me any Raider team you want. You watch my video that I put out earlier this morning, and if you can watch that video and you see the numbers, you see the stats, you see everything that backs it up, because it's not just the team that is on the field. It is everything that goes on with it. You had 11 draft picks. You had top 2 money and salary cap space, and you were able to go out and get your quarterback. If you have those 3 things working in your favor, you shouldn't be 2-12, and you shouldn't look like a absolute disaster of a football team on and off the field. And that's what the Raiders are. When you allow your guys to get away with certain things, it's the situation that the Raiders are in. And the Raiders right now underneath Pete Carroll are the biggest disaster that they've ever been on and off the field, because Raider fans hate your current quarterback. They hate your current coaching staff, and they hate the product on the field. Mark, I don't know how you could even think about it, but there's no way you can keep Pete Carroll. And Pete knows it. I think Geno Smith knows it. And I think a lot of people in that locker room are starting to realize it as well. Before I get out of here, though, I want to give a shout-out to our Week 15 MVP, Yoda Jenkins. Mount Raidermore, he's been showing up. He's been showing out. And I just want to say again to you, Yoda, bottom of my heart, dude, thank you so much for always pulling up here to the Raiders Report. But you know what? I want to be able to show some love to some of the other MVPs that we've had through a very, very long season. From Week 1, Raider Ron. Week 2, Alex McGuire. You see Week 3 there, Kane Michael B. Shout out to Lord Cameron Abbott, Alan Cruz, Isaac Hernandez, wild one. The bye week, I said, well, maybe we won't lose during the bye. We also lost during the bye. Lord Cameron Abbott, another one. Yoda Jenkins in there with another one. And, you just go through, you look at a lot of these names here, and Yoda, the Week 15 MVP, the Week 12 MVP, 4 out of the 15 weeks. Yoda, I see you, I salute you, and to everybody that always shows up and shows out, good times are ahead of us. Better times have to be ahead of us. But when you watch me and you watch a Pete Carroll presser, I just want y'all to be very, very clear. Proceed with caution, because I don't know what the hell I'm going to say.